former federal law minister and a very eminent jurist of Pakistan who specializes particularly in the international law, to throw light on the legislative and legal dimensions of this challenge that we face. My dear friend Ahmed Bilal Sufi, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Honorable Minister, Honorable Panelist, Honorable Ladies and Gentlemen, Diplomats, Assalamu alaikum. The center says it will be Center for Countering Terrorism and Violent Extremism Studies. So what kind of studies? Some have been indicated by the Minister as a requirement from the state standpoint. But then there are larger issues at the same time that need to be looked into. One is the regional extremist tendencies. We see in our neighborhood, this region, entire region, the Central Asia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan, of course, follow a certain religion. So the question would be, what is the legal undertones of the religious narratives? Whether religion and international law or domestic law can be used to counter extremist narrative. When we come to a point where a terrorist has to be prosecuted, the society has half failed in winning back. That is a preventive measures. Now you do not have a framework. You have to respond to someone who believes he can attack the state, rightly or wrongly. Now, left with no choice, you have to prosecute him. And for prosecution, there are challenges. But before that stage comes, how can one make an effort to win back and reverse that mindset, which says, I intend to attack the state or international states, or cross the boundaries of my state and launch myself into another state, and so on. In this regard, I think two areas will merit serious considerations from a long-term perspective of making sure that how can we reverse this frame of mind. The first one is the international law framework. To me, international law framework is one of the important tools to counter extremist violence and extremism. What is international law? It is a discipline under which states operate. That discipline has certainly been badly hit recently in the case of Israel, in the case of Pakistan and India, where we saw Indus Water Treaty holding in abeyance. But those few incidences apart, there's a global framework under which all states operate. There's sanctity of treaties, there's sanctity of boundary treaties, which is a framework linked with the UN Charter. And there is an obligation to honor it, not only on the states, but people who are the citizens of the state. And it's a duty of the state to communicate this information to the citizens of the state so that they can self-align, they can self-correct. An example I can give, few years back, we invited to the Research Society of International Law think tank in Lahore, the madrasas, some top leadership, including some muballigh speakers of the various mosques. They are very bright people, about 12, 13 of them. We distributed the UN Charter and the UN Security Council Resolution 1373 to them. And we made them go through it. They were taken over. After 3 hours of session, they came back to me and said, no one informed us that international law has now regimes to counter terrorism. It is a prohibited framework. No one informed us that there is a UN Charter which prohibits you can't launch yourself as entities across international borders. So had we been informed, we may have aligned our narrative more effectively with this legal framework. So I think one study or one exercise could be linking up with madrasas, linking up with centers which are now coming up, and converting them and making them aware of the global discipline framework. And this discipline is not 1, 2, 3 treaties, 4 treaties, 5 treaties. There are over 200,000 international treaties, commitments of the state of Pakistan and likewise state of others. So I think that is one dimension to take up, that to use international law as a tool to de-radicalize people gradually over a period of time. That narrative needs to be built in. So the narrative that has been coming of an extremist nature in particularly Islamic jurisprudence. The second important aspect is that how religion is fueling extremism. If you have read last Sunday, perhaps, Parvez Hoodbhai Saab's article on why Gaza happened, he tracks it back to various issues, but an extremist Christian narrative in US by evangelists who talk of that venue to be part, that is their right, religious right. So now there's a religious undertone. You look at next door, Hindutva framework, there is a religious undertone to expand boundaries of Khand and make it Akhand Bharat. So there is a religious undertone that initially Islam was being blamed, but today we have this Christian extremist frameworks coming up, Hindu extremist framework coming up. So those frameworks need to be addressed as well. And there has to be a response to that. There has to be a religious narrative responding to that. Quran, which is followed by the entire Muslim world, talks about upholding Misak and Akud, which is basically the treaties that you execute. So whenever Quran says you have to uphold the Misak that you execute between people or between states, you have to uphold that. So suddenly a religious obligation is there. It also talks about that you have the right to use force as and when required to rescue suppressed people. And they had also talked, which is in rhyme with the Article 1 of the Genocide Convention as well. So there are a lot of similarities between religious narrative, domestic narrative, and international law narrative. I believe these kinds of studies, which look deeper into these similarities, can create a counter version of religious narrative as well. And once we dovetail it with the international community framework, we can have a more concrete basis. Something on the lines of Paigam-e-Pakistan is an excellent initiative, but it needs greater depth of understanding in terms of jurisprudence. It is good to know that people, non-state actors, believe that jihad or use of force is a responsibility of the state. But that responsibility has to be given to specialized entities within the state and not to individuals. But now, on the other hand, we also see the Hindutva framework talking about that they want to expand. This is a very, very serious threat coming up soon. It has actually manifested itself. The Indus Water Treaty holding in abeyance is just one of the first steps of manifestation. The second step, it seems to me, is threatening the neighboring states. The fourth step, it seems to me, is that they are choosing not to withdraw from the Akhand Bharat map that they have on the parliament. So extremist ideologies are driving international relations. So I believe those aspects need to be looked into. And as I said, gave an example of UN law relating to countering terrorism and countering framework is something that also needs to be passed on to religious venues. What I find also very interesting is that new universities are being given chartered, which were ex-madrasas. I find this very positive development. So Al-Ghazali University in Karachi, which is linked with a certain madrasa, or even not Rifa may not be that, but Ikra and so on, other universities coming up. Somebody was talking about setting up a think tank of science and technology in the name of Imam Ahmad Raza, one of the Brailwi senior persons. Very interesting developments. And that should be the direction to take. Why? If you go to Oxford and Cambridge, they were also Christian madrasas of their time. So 800 years ago, there was every chapel and every church dominates the colleges in Oxford and Cambridge, but gradually they moved on from divinity to real life issues, physics, chemistry, and so on, and they grew. But that simple architecture makes a statement about. So diversion, this is going to be a long-term thing, Minister. This is going to be a long-term thing. But these are the kind of innovations we need to look at. I thank you for the time that you've given to me.